The galaxy had whispered of them for centuries, but the whispers were always half dismissed, like a story told around a fire that no one wanted to believe. To the elder races, humans were an anomaly, a young species that had clawed its way out of a single cradle world and into the stars with reckless speed. They weren't born with scales hardened against void radiation. They didn't have claws that could rip metal apart. They didn't even live particularly long compared to most interstellar civilizations. And yet, here they were, spreading like wildfire, faster than anyone expected, faster than anyone thought possible. The first time the others truly noticed humanity was not when Earth lit its skies with primitive rockets, nor when fragile colonies appeared on barren moons. No, the galaxy noticed when humans unlocked faster-than-light travel. It wasn't supposed to happen that quickly. A species barely old enough to remember when it walked with stone tools should not have been able to fold space and tear open the silent fabric of the void. And yet, humanity had done it, and with that one act, every empire felt the faint stirring of unease. But unease was not yet fear. Not yet. The Krail were the first to make contact. A warrior race bred in the crucible of endless clan wars, they had crushed entire systems into silence. To them, humanity was little more than an ambitious child that needed to be disciplined. They approached with superiority, with arrogance, expecting submission. Instead, they found something they did not expect. Humans didn't submit. They laughed. Not the laugh of joy or peace, but the kind of laugh one gives at the edge of despair, when logic says surrender but instinct says fight. The Krail had seen many things in their campaigns across the stars, but they had never seen a people who smiled while facing annihilation. That smile unsettled them. That smile lingered in their memory long after the battles ended, long after ships were torn apart and worlds were left in ruins. Because that was the first lesson the galaxy began to learn. When humans feel fear, they don't break. They sharpen. Stories began spreading through the void. Rumors carried across fractured channels, whispered among smugglers, diplomats, even spies. A human ship trapped by 3 enemy cruisers managed not only to survive, but to destroy them all by detonating its own engines in a suicidal blaze. Colonists on a frontier world, outnumbered 10-1, built weapons out of mining tools and scrap metal, holding off seasoned mercenaries until reinforcements arrived. Children huddled in bunkers who should have been paralyzed by terror instead grew up clutching old rifles, swearing to carry the fight forward. The galaxy started to ask, what kind of species reacts to fear like that? It wasn't strength of body. Humanity's bones could break. Their skin could bleed. Their machines, while clever, weren't always the most advanced. What unsettled the galaxy was that fear didn't weaken them, it fueled them. And the more the galaxy tested them, the clearer this became. A council of allied empires once debated in secret chambers, wondering how far they could push humanity before they bent. Would they abandon their colonies if enough were burned? Would they stop exploring if enough ships vanished into the dark? Would they lose heart if they watched their people suffer? It was a dangerous experiment, one that the elder races thought they could control. But with each act meant to humble the humans, the opposite happened. Instead of retreating, they surged forward, hungrier, angrier, more determined. The humans began asking their own questions. Questions the galaxy did not want them to ask. Why did these ancient empires rule the stars like eternal monarchs? Why were so many voices silenced, so many species kept small and afraid? Why was fear used as a chain when fear could just as easily become a spark? And then came the night that changed everything. A remote human listening post detected an incoming fleet, larger than anything they had faced before. Dozens of capital ships, hundreds of escorts, all bristling with weapons designed to erase entire populations. The Allied empires had decided to make an example of humanity. Break them now, before the infection of their spirits spread further. It wasn't just war, it was extermination. On the human side, panic threatened to take root. Families were evacuated. Children whispered prayers. Soldiers stared at the endless void, wondering if their lives would end in a blaze of fire. But then something strange happened, something that turned dread into something sharper. One voice cut through the fear. A commander stood before them and said, almost in a whisper, "Do you know what humans do to fear?" That question echoed in every mind. It wasn't answered right away because the answer wasn't words, it was action. The listening post held. The colonies braced. The fleet scrambled into formation. Fear wasn't gone, no, but it had been tamed, chained, reshaped into something burning and unstoppable. And somewhere, out there in the void, the alien fleet pressed on, confident in their numbers, confident in their ancient traditions of dominance. They didn't yet realize what kind of fire they were about to walk into. The galaxy would soon learn that humans didn't cower before fear. They fed on it. They grew from it. And when they had no choice left, when the dark surrounded them and the odds demanded surrender, they became something that no empire, no ancient throne, no timeless council could predict. Because humanity's gift was never their technology, never their strength, never even their will to expand. It was the way they looked fear in the eye and refused to be owned by it. The alien fleet entered human space, expecting to find prey. What they found instead was a species that had taken its fear, sharpened it into steel, and aimed it back at them like a blade. And as the first shots echoed in the cold silence of the void, as the first ships lit up the dark with fire, the galaxy's whispers returned. This time they weren't just whispers of unease. They were whispers of something else, something that felt very much like fear. But this time it wasn't humanity that felt it. The others did. And the war for the truth of what humans do to fear had only just begun. The room fell into silence after the question was asked. The words echoed in every ear, but no one wanted to be the first to respond. Do you know what humans do to fear? The phrase was strange, almost absurd at first. To most species across the galaxy, fear was something inevitable, a force that dictated caution, survival, or retreat. But humanity was not like most species. Their history carried proof of something different, something unsettling. The council chamber was filled with representatives of a dozen civilizations, each sitting with tension etched across their alien features. They had gathered to debate whether humanity's growing presence in the galaxy was a threat that must be controlled. At first, humans were underestimated, just another primitive species who had stumbled into faster-than-light travel with more luck than wisdom. But now, whispers moved from system to system, stories that didn't fade but grew sharper with every retelling. Stories of colonies that refused to surrender, of fleets that fought past reason, of people who walked into the jaws of certain death and did not break. For many, it wasn't humanity's technology that unsettled them, it was the way humans confronted fear itself. Fear for other species was a boundary. For humans it seemed to be fuel. And that was what made the council uneasy tonight. The human delegate stood quietly watching the others. His voice had been the one to ask the question, calm and unshaken, yet carrying a weight that pressed into the room. He did not shout, did not threaten, but his presence alone forced them to remember what they had seen in battle reports and first-hand encounters. The Threx representative, his body covered in scales that shifted with nervous colors, finally spoke. Fear drives all beings. Even the strongest retreat when fear reaches its limit. Yet your kind does not. We do not understand. Do you truly feel nothing? The human tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. We feel everything. We feel the cold grip in our chests, the voice that tells us to run, the certainty of death. But we do not let it decide for us. We decide. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Other species looked at one another, remembering old reports that had once been dismissed as exaggeration. The siege of Arelon, where a human outpost stood against a fleet 10 times its size and did not surrender until the last defender fell. The Black Rift expedition, where human explorers entered uncharted space that swallowed every other probe sent before, and returned with maps, scars, and warnings. Fear should have kept them away. But they had gone anyway. The Zyri envoy, tall and thin with silvered eyes, leaned forward. You call it deciding. We call it madness. How can your people walk into the teeth of the impossible again and again and not crumble? Do you seek death? The human's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. No. We seek life. Fear tells us what we stand to lose. And when we know what we might lose, we fight harder than anyone else. It was not bravado. It was not arrogance. It was spoken like a truth carved into the bones of his species. And that was why the room trembled. For a moment, the alien leaders saw not just the human before them but the shadows of millions behind him. Miners who dug into collapsing tunnels to save their crew, pilots who flew broken ships into battle so others could escape, soldiers who stood against fleets with nothing but determination and fire in their eyes. To beings who had built entire civilizations around avoiding fear, humanity's relationship with it felt unnatural. It was as if they had tamed a beast that no other species dared face. The council leader tried to steady her voice. And if fear no longer binds you, if no threat can turn you back, what will stop you? What will keep you from pushing until every border is broken, until every empire falls? The human did not answer immediately. His gaze swept across the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. For the briefest heartbeat, every one of them felt the weight of his silence. Then softly he said, "That depends on you." A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. What did that mean? Was it a warning or an offer? The ambiguity itself was frightening. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not with the sharpest blades or the largest fleets, but with something that no calculation could predict. And now the galaxy was forced to wonder. If fear could not hold them back, what could? The Threx shifted uneasily, his scales glowing with anxiety. We cannot face such recklessness. War with your kind would not end until all sides are ash. And yet you think of it, the human said quietly, almost mournful. You sit here, planning how to contain us, how to draw lines in space and say, here you must stop. But tell me, when has fear ever stopped us from crossing a line? When has fear ever kept us from stepping forward? The question burned in the air. Everyone remembered humanity's history, brief though it was in galactic terms. They had stepped onto barren worlds with storms strong enough to tear metal apart, had built colonies on frozen planets where no sane species lingered, had sailed into voids where the stars themselves seemed dead. Each step forward should have been checked by fear. Instead, fear seemed to light the path they took. Some in the chamber saw this as strength, others as a curse. The truth was unclear, and that was what made humanity unpredictable. The council leader's voice cracked as she spoke again. Then perhaps we must ask not what you do to fear, but what fear will make you do to us. The human stood straighter. His shadow stretched long across the chamber floor, and for an instant, it felt like more than just one man casting it. You want to know what humans do to fear? His voice lowered, steady as stone. We take it, we break it, and we turn it into the fire that drives us forward. If fear is what stands between us and survival, then fear burns. No one spoke after that. The words settled into every corner of the chamber, a truth no one could unhear. Fear to the galaxy was a leash. To humanity it was a torch. But if fear was fuel, how far could they go? What worlds would they burn through? The thought was terrifying, not just to the council but to anyone who would ever stand against them. The meeting ended, but no decisions were made. The alien leaders filed out in silence, each one shaken, each one haunted by the same question that had started the night. Do you know what humans do to fear? Outside the chamber, stars gleamed cold against the void. Somewhere among them, fleets were moving, colonies were growing, and humanity was preparing for whatever came next. The galaxy was left with a shadow hanging over it, a tension that could not be resolved, a dread that whispered louder with every passing moment. For though the question had been asked, the true answer had not yet been seen. And soon, very soon, the galaxy would find out for itself. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. The alien delegates, beings of ancient empires and worlds older than human history, sat stiff and watchful. Their eyes, or whatever organs they had that could see, were fixed on the humans standing at the far end of the hall. They had expected trembling voices, pale faces, and weak hands that betrayed fear. That was what the universe knew. When cornered, most species broke. But the humans did not break. Their voices carried steady, their eyes burned with something different. Not the absence of fear, but a defiance that made fear itself seem powerless. The air was thick with tension. The alien council had revealed threats sharp enough to crush entire civilizations. Fleets that had erased species. Weapons that had shattered planets. They had thought humans would beg for mercy. Instead, the humans listened. Silent. Measuring. Their restraint was worse than shouting. It was worse than any plea for survival. Because the silence did not speak of surrender, it spoke of planning. One alien leaned forward, their voice a hiss of disbelief. Do you not understand? Fear is survival. Fear bends you so you do not break. The human leader's reply was soft, almost quiet enough to be lost in the hum of the chamber, but every syllable carried across the hall. We understand fear better than anyone. But do you know what we do to fear? The hall shifted. Beings who had crossed galaxies to conquer others shifted in their seats. They didn't know why, but something in those words tightened their chest, quickened their pulse. A coldness rippled through them that no warship could explain. Outside, orbiting the alien world like predators circling prey, the human fleet hung silent against the stars. Ships of steel and fire, scarred by battles already fought. To the galaxy they were newcomers. Fragile upstarts. But those who looked closer saw something more. Every hull told a story of survival. Every weapon carried not just firepower but intent. Humanity had not built those ships to expand an empire. They had built them to endure. And endurance terrified the galaxy more than any weapon. Word spread quickly through the alien ranks. The humans had come from a small, overlooked system. They should have remained insignificant. Yet here they stood, unflinching before the empires that had survived for thousands of years. Their fleets were not the largest. Their weapons not the most advanced. But the humans carried something else, something the galaxy had not prepared for, the refusal to let fear dictate their limits. Whispers filled the chamber as the alien leaders debated. Some dismissed humanity as reckless. Others saw danger in their eyes. But beneath the surface, fear stirred. Not fear of the weapons the humans carried, but fear of what they were willing to do when cornered. The tension grew unbearable. The alien council raised their voices, shouting demands, threats, promises. Yet the humans did not move. They waited until the hall fell silent again, the echoes of alien fury fading into the walls. Then the human leader stepped forward, closer to the council table. "We know what it is to fear," he said. His voice was calm, but the weight of history pressed into his words. On our world, fear came in many forms. Hunger, fire, storm, war. Every generation fear tested us. And every generation we changed it. We do not bow to fear. We sharpen it. We make it ours. Fear drives us, but it never breaks us. For the first time, the alien council hesitated. There was something unsettling about a species that did not deny fear, but embraced it. Most civilizations in the galaxy built entire philosophies around erasing fear. To see fear not as a weakness but as fuel, it was something the galaxy had not imagined. The silence grew heavy again. And in that silence, a message pulsed through the stars. Human ships were moving. Not away, not retreating. They were advancing, slow and deliberate, toward the heart of alien power. The alien leaders demanded answers. What are you doing? You will not survive this. But survival was never the question. The humans had already survived worse than anyone imagined. Deep inside their fleet, crew members tightened harnesses, checked systems, exchanged glances that carried the weight of unspoken truths. They were afraid. Every single one of them. But instead of hiding it, they let fear harden their resolve. Their hearts beat faster, but it steadied their hands. Their voices shook, but they spoke anyway. Fear was not their enemy. Fear was their fire. The aliens, watching the slow advance of human ships, felt something they had not felt in centuries. For all their power, all their control, the galaxy was shifting. The humans were not stronger in numbers. They were not superior in technology. Yet they carried something sharper than weapons, heavier than fleets, the willingness to turn fear into a weapon of their own. And for the first time, the empires realized they were not the hunters anymore. The room trembled as another alien tried to raise their voice. But their words faltered, drowned by the sound of human ships piercing deeper into orbit. Outside the great windows, light rippled across the void like a warning. The human leader stood silent now, watching the alien council break into panic. That was the final truth. The galaxy had misunderstood fear. They thought it was a chain. Humanity had turned it into wings. And now, as the alien empire scrambled to understand, the humans stood ready to show them exactly what that meant. The story held on the edge of the unknown. Would the galaxy unleash its full might to crush these defiant newcomers? Or would it hesitate, afraid to confront the truth already forming in every heart? No one in the chamber had the answer. Not yet. But as the humans prepared their next move, one thing was certain. Fear no longer belonged to the galaxy's empires. It belonged to humanity. And the galaxy had only just begun to learn what that truly meant. The silence after the human commander's warning was the kind that seemed to stretch across eternity. Ships from a dozen alien civilizations hung in orbit above the scarred moon, weapons armed but unmoving, as if every captain was waiting for someone else to make the first mistake. The humans had not fired. They hadn't even raised their shields to full. They simply stood there, surrounded, outnumbered, and yet every instinct told the gathered fleets that this was not a cornered prey, it was a predator waiting for someone to test its teeth. Rumors had always whispered through the void. Whispers of what humanity did to those who threatened them. Not extermination, not the cold logic of machines. Something worse. A war with humans was not a clean war of numbers, ships, and victories tallied on a screen. It was a descent into something primal, where fear became a weapon sharper than any blade and heavier than any fleet. The alien empires had told themselves these were exaggerations, stories told by defeated powers to justify their failures. But now, staring at the still, silent formation of human vessels, the doubt was gone. The stories were true. The second twist came slowly, a creeping realization. Humanity had not come with their full fleet. This was not even a fraction of their power. The scans showed their presence clearly, a mere advanced detachment, only a few dozen warships. And yet the sheer pressure of their silence made the gathered armadas hesitate, weapons trembling at the edge of activation. What kind of species faced down hundreds of hostile vessels with a handful of their own and did not so much as flinch? And then the first message came, not from the humans but from within the alien ranks. A distress beacon, not of damage but of mutiny. On one of the vessels in the coalition, an officer had opened fire on their own captain, claiming that obeying orders to fight the humans was suicide. The crew had begun fighting each other, tearing apart their chain of command. The War Council panicked. They had gathered here united under fear of human expansion, promising to strike first before humanity's influence spread further. But unity under fear is brittle, and as the humans sat motionless, the cracks widened. The human commander finally spoke again. Just one sentence, translated into every tongue across the fleets. "You know what we do to fear." The words spread like a contagion. Captains whispered them, crew repeated them, and across the War Council, leaders stared at one another in dread. What did they mean? Did they mean annihilation? Torture? Some weapon hidden in their holds? But those who had studied humanity, those who had read their history, knew the answer was worse. Humans did not bow to fear. They twisted it, controlled it, and turned it against their enemies until those enemies destroyed themselves. It was already happening. On another ship, engines fired prematurely, pushing the vessel forward as panic overtook discipline. Another fleet broke formation entirely, scattering back into the void, unwilling to face what might come next. The second twist revealed itself in a single terrible truth. The humans hadn't fired a single shot, and yet the coalition was already unraveling. Their greatest weapon was not their fleet, not their faster-than-light engines, not even their antimatter cores. It was the terror they inspired. Fear was the battlefield, and humanity had already won half the war before it began. But the humans were not content to let the collapse run its course. They wanted the message seared into the memory of every civilization watching. Slowly, with precise movements, their warships broke formation and advanced. Not firing, not broadcasting threats. Just moving forward, deliberate and unstoppable. Each pulse of their engines echoed like a heartbeat across the void, a reminder that they were coming closer, step by step. Alien commanders screamed orders, tried to rally their fleets, tried to remind them of their overwhelming numbers. But the voices of reason were drowned in the panic. Ships began colliding in their rush to flee, weapons discharged accidentally into allies, and the battlefield became chaos. The coalition had planned for human weapons. They had not planned for the fear of humans. On the human bridge, the crew remained calm, their faces grim but steady. They knew what they were doing. They were not chasing victory through destruction. They were wielding terror itself as the cleanest, sharpest blade. And they knew the galaxy would remember this moment for centuries. But then a new signal entered the battlefield, cutting through the chaos. It was not human. It was something else. From deep space, beyond the edge of the system, a new fleet appeared. Unknown markings, unknown energy signatures, but enormous in scale. A third force. They had been watching all along, waiting for the galaxy to be distracted, and now they revealed themselves. Every screen lit up with their presence, and for a heartbeat, even the humans looked surprised. The coalition's fear turned to desperation as they realized they were now caught between two predators. But the humans, they smiled. Because fear was still their weapon. And whoever this new power was, they had just stepped into a war where the humans had already chosen the battlefield. The stakes had risen beyond comprehension. It was no longer about one coalition or one fleet. This was about the galaxy itself, trembling in the shadow of a species that refused to bow, a species that twisted fear until it broke empires. And now, another empire had come forward, unaware of what humanity did to fear. The crew watched the readings of the new arrivals with a calm intensity. The commander's voice was steady as he said the words that sent another shiver across the comms. Then let them learn. The scene froze there, balanced on the knife edge of chaos and revelation. The coalition broken, the new fleet rising, the humans ready to show the galaxy what it meant to wield fear as a weapon. And everyone everywhere realized they were about to witness something no history book could prepare them for. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. For a heartbeat, it felt as though the entire galaxy held its breath. The enemy ships, once proud and threatening, now floated powerless, stripped of their weapons and will. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had not just fought the war, they had turned the very idea of fear back onto those who thought themselves untouchable. The alien armada had expected humans to run, to hide, to beg. Instead, they had watched in disbelief as humanity stood in the face of impossible odds and refused to bend. But it wasn't the technology that broke them, nor the numbers. It was the way humans wielded fear itself. They did not let it chain them, they shaped it into resolve. Every ship that burned, every sacrifice, only hardened their determination. And now that determination had reached its peak. As the final human fleet surged forward, engines burning bright against the darkness, the enemy command realized too late what they were up against. They had feared humanity's weapons, but they had never understood that the true weapon was their spirit. Fear did not paralyze them, it gave them focus. It gave them strength. It gave them unity. The enemy leader barked orders, frantic, desperate, but the damage was already done. The humans had pierced the heart of their formation. One ship, scarred and half destroyed, rammed into their command carrier, detonating in a blast that shook space itself. The chain reaction lit up the void, a reminder that no matter how fragile humans appeared, they carried within them a fire that could not be extinguished. But then came the twist: the humans had not sought annihilation. As the wreckage drifted and the echoes of battle faded, the surviving alien crews realized the humans had spared them. Their ships could have been destroyed completely. Their surrender could have been forced with brutality. Instead, the humans pulled back at the very moment of total victory. They left the survivors with their lives intact, but with something far worse than death. They left them with the truth that humans were not only capable of turning fear into strength, but of mastering it so completely that they could choose mercy where others would only know vengeance. The galaxy had seen empires rise and fall, each driven by domination, greed, and bloodlust. But now they had seen something else, something terrifying in its simplicity. Humans had fought, bled, and sacrificed, and when the moment came to crush their enemies entirely, they chose restraint. And in that restraint, the aliens saw their doom. For a foe who kills you can be feared, but a foe who defeats you and then spares you, that is a force you can never truly stand against. On the bridge of the lead human vessel, battered faces watched the enemy retreat. No one cheered. No one smiled. They carried the weight of their losses, the cost of survival heavy in their eyes. Fear had not vanished. It lingered in the silence between them. But it was no longer a chain. It was something else now, an ember they had tamed, a reminder of what they were capable of when the universe pushed them to the edge. As the humans drifted in the aftermath, the galaxy whispered. Stories spread faster than light, carried on every signal, every frightened report. The question echoed from world to world, the same question that had sparked terror in the minds of those who had dared to attack. Do you know what humans do to fear? Now everyone knew. Humans turned it into victory. Humans turned it into survival. Humans turned it into something the galaxy would never forget. And for the first time, those who had thought themselves predators began to wonder if they were, in fact, the prey. But just as the survivors began to retreat into silence, one last transmission was received. A hidden fleet, larger and older than the one that had just been shattered, emerged from the shadows of deep space. Their symbols were different. Their voices colder. They had not joined the battle before, waiting to see what humans were truly made of. And now, after witnessing the impossible, they spoke a single sentence that froze every human heart. You have conquered fear, the voice said, steady and calm, but can you survive what lies beyond it? The stars flickered as new signatures filled the void. The war was not over. Humanity had won a battle, but in doing so, they had awakened something greater. And as the humans braced themselves, bloodied but unbroken, the galaxy realized this was only the beginning of a story no one could predict. The climax had come, but the final truth was yet to be written. Fear had been mastered, but what came after fear might be even more dangerous. The new enemy fleet lingered on the edges of the stars like a shadow that refused to fade. Their message echoed in every corner of human space, a reminder that victory was never the end but only another beginning. Yet on the bridge of the battered human flagship, silence stretched for long moments before anyone dared to breathe again. The crew was exhausted, their bodies broken, their hearts scarred by everything they had endured. But there was a strange calm as well, a realization that what they had already achieved was beyond anything they had once believed possible. The galaxy had seen fear used as a weapon, sharpened and aimed at humans with the hope of breaking them. Instead, fear had become the fire that carried them forward. They had turned weakness into strength, turned despair into defiance, and turned terror into the will to survive. The armada that had once seemed unstoppable now lay shattered. And though a greater enemy waited in the dark, humanity had already proven something that no empire could erase. They were unyielding. The survivors gathered across human colonies, ships, and outposts, their voices carried through transmissions and whispered conversations. For the first time they could speak not of survival alone but of meaning. Families who had lost everything still found a strange comfort in knowing that their loved ones' sacrifices had changed the course of history. Soldiers who had stared death in the eye could hold their heads high, knowing they had done the impossible. The story spread beyond the battlefield. Civilians, miners, traders, and children, every human being, felt it in their bones. The galaxy had wanted them to fear, but instead, it was the galaxy that now whispered in dread, the fear of human. The alien survivors, drifting with damaged hulls and silenced weapons, carried their own stories. They had once believed themselves eternal, their empires carved in steel and fire. Now, when they looked at humanity, they saw not a fragile species clinging to survival but something far more dangerous. They saw a people who could take every loss, every moment of despair, and build it into a weapon of the spirit. For the aliens, defeat was not just military, it was psychological. They knew they could never look at humans the same way again. Back on Earth, the scars of war were etched into every city and every heart. Yet even in the ruins, life stirred. Children played in streets where craters still smoked. Farmers returned to broken fields, planting again with calloused hands. Rebuilding was never easy, but it was in those quiet acts that humanity's strength shone brightest. They did not wait for fear to fade, they carried it with them, reshaping it into courage. The leaders of humanity gathered in a hall that had once been marked for demolition. The walls still bore the marks of fire, but no one cared. What mattered was the voices inside. There was debate, anger, grief, exhaustion, but above it all, there was unity. They had stood together when the universe wanted them broken, and they would stand together again, no matter what new fleet had appeared on the horizon. The decision was simple, though heavy: prepare, rebuild, and never forget what had been learned. One soldier, standing among the crowd, finally spoke words that lingered in every ear: "We are not fearless. We never will be. But maybe that's our greatest weapon. Because fear reminds us of what we stand to lose. Fear sharpens our choices. Fear makes us human. And being human is what they can never understand." It was not a declaration of invincibility, but it was something greater, an acceptance of who they were. The galaxy had tried to use fear as a blade against them, but humans had forged it into armor. Now, every survivor carried that truth within them. Across the stars, whispers turned into stories and stories into warnings. Some alien worlds trembled at the thought of ever facing humans again. Others tried to reason, to bargain, to imagine alliances. And some, still drunk with pride, swore revenge. But no matter the response, the image remained the same: fragile humans standing in the dark, outnumbered, outgunned, and yet unbroken. That was the fear of human, not their weapons, not their fleets, but the spirit that refused to die. The hidden fleet that had revealed itself in the climax never struck immediately. Perhaps they were waiting, perhaps they were studying, perhaps they wanted to see if humanity would collapse under the weight of its own scars. But instead of collapsing, humanity grew. They did not forget their dead, but they carried them forward in memory. They did not ignore their pain, but they shaped it into purpose. That patience from the shadows became its own mistake, because with each day that passed, humans became stronger, wiser, more united. And then came the final twist, not in fire but in silence. When the hidden fleet finally sent their next transmission, it was not a declaration of war. It was a single message, encrypted and carried on frequencies designed to test human resolve. *, we will wait. You are not prey, not predator. You are something else. When the stars shift again, we will see what you become. *. It was not surrender nor alliance. It was something more dangerous: acknowledgement. The hidden enemy did not fear human weapons, but they feared what humanity represented: the unknown. And in that moment, humanity understood that the greatest strength they carried was not victory in battle, but the ability to change the rules entirely. Years passed, and the galaxy never forgot. Humans rebuilt their homes, their ships, and their hearts, but they also carried with them the memory of the war that had tested them to the edge. Children grew up hearing the stories, not as myths but as truths written in sacrifice. To them, fear was not a chain but a teacher. And with every generation, the lesson deepened. In the end, the war became more than survival. It became a reminder to all of existence that fear is not the end of a story, it is the beginning. And when faced with the question, "Do you know what humans do to fear?" the galaxy already knew the answer. They master it. They endure it. They turn it into something no enemy can defeat. That is the fear of human. And as the stars stretched on into endless night, humanity walked forward, not fearless but unyielding, ready for whatever came next.